You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 CBS Radio.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. This week we celebrate April as National Poetry Month with three fine poets, Irena Klepfisz, Toi Derricotte, and Ursula K. LeGuin, plus a surprise. They'll each talk about the joys, the mysteries, and most of all the craft involved in the making of a poem, and each will read some of her poetry. We did a special poetry episode last April, and it's now become a tradition. But first, we need to look inside the headlines. Sometimes inside the headlines is about the headlines that never were and should have been. For example, on April 7th, there was, I think, a major demonstration in Washington, but you'd never know it. It's a best-kept secret. 100 women gathered from across the country to launch a 48-hour fast on the National Mall in culmination of a month-long women's fast for families that had taken place all across the country. The Women's Fast for Families grew from a National Women's Summit held in February, where women leaders pledged to continue to highlight immigration reform as a women's issue, because, of course, it separates families, and to push back on inaction on reform as a front of the war on women. The Women's Fast for Families is a collaboration of the group We Belong Together, the Fair Immigration Reform Movement, and SEIU. They gathered, they fasted, they filled up a courage basket with messages, and Nancy Pelosi led a delegation of women representatives, 10 congresswomen, to the demonstration and picked up the basket and the message and the messages of courage to spread the courage and feed courage to Congress to act on sensible immigration. If you want to be involved or support this in any way, it's very simple. It's webelongtogether.org, and it points out that the priorities of women in immigration reform, include a clear path to citizenship, keeping families together, upholding the family immigration system, protecting survivors of violence, preventing workplace abuses, and promoting the health and well-being of women and children. And they make a point of honoring women's work inside as well as outside the home and not driven by enforcement. We Belong Together is co-anchored by the National Domestic Workers Alliance and the National Asian Pacific American Women's Forum. It's a very good idea and a good form of activism, and you can find it at webelongtogether.org. But you won't find it in the headlines. Now our first guest. The poet Irena Klepfisz was born in the Warsaw Ghetto on April 17, 1941, and she was only 2 years old during the uprising, during which her father was killed. She escaped with her mother to the Polish countryside, and they survived the Second World War by hiding and concealing their Jewish identities, aided by Polish peasants. After the war, they managed to get to Sweden and then finally to the United States in 1949. She began publishing her poetry in 1971, and she's worked as an activist in feminist, lesbian, and secular Jewish communities. She's also co-founder of the Jewish Women's Committee to End the Occupation of the West Bank and Gaza. She teaches at Barnard College, and her latest book of prose and essays is Dreams of an Insomniac, Jewish Feminist Essays, Speeches, and Diatribes. And her latest book of poems is A Few Words in the Mother Tongue, Poems Selected and New, 1971-1990. She is known as a Yiddishist in that she is trying to revive and keep alive the literature, language, and tradition of Yiddish. Here is Irena Klepfisz. Irena, welcome to Women's Media Center Live.
Thank you for having me.
Your new and selected poems, the one called A Few Words in the Mother Tongue, has a stunning introduction by our late friend, yours and mine, Adrienne Rich, in which she says the following about your work. She's talking in particular about your major poem, Bashert, which means the inevitable. And she says, Klepfisz has written one of the great borderland poems which emerge from the consciousness of being of no one geography, time zone, or culture. In your last book of essays also, you address women's link, forging a woman's link, that's it. I will mispronounce this, so correct me. In Die Goldene Kite?
The Goldene Kate. The Golden Chain.
The Golden Chain. Some possibilities for Jewish American poetry. That's an essay in Dreams of an Insomniac. So talk a little bit, a short version for our listeners about why they call you a Yiddishist, and what you're doing with language in terms of identity.
Well, I was raised in an environment in which everybody called themselves Yiddishist. I mean, they were very committed to the Yiddish language. These were secular Jews. They were Holocaust survivors. And I was not raised with any kind of real observance. I don't think I entered a synagogue until I was in my 40s for the first time. Mm-hmm. But we were very, very consciously Jewish, and Yiddish was a very important element of that Jewish consciousness. And that had a history. It was secular. It was called Weltliche Yiddishkeit, secular Judaism or secular Jewishness, that was very active between the two world wars in Poland. And I was raised in a socialist environment that included that element, and it was basically a political philosophy of the Jewish Labor Bund, which was Yiddish-based. And so I mean, I think one of the things, my consciousness about this was extremely strong, but I think one of the sort of paradoxes is that for some reason, I wrote poetry for about 15 years without ever considering using Yiddish until I met Gloria Anzaldúa, who was a Chicana from Texas and using a lot of Spanish in her work. And she turned to me one time, and we had talked about our backgrounds. We had very different, in many ways, different backgrounds, but also similar backgrounds. And she said, "How come you never use Yiddish?" And I was just sort of stunned by the question, which this is in the early 80s. From then on, it was around 1982, that I started trying to incorporate Yiddish into both my prose and my poetry.
Mm-hmm. And you often do both English and Yiddish in the same poem, so that the ear and the eye become accustomed to the interplay between them.
Right. Some people call me a Yiddish poet, which I am certainly not. But I do want people to actually hear the Yiddish. I want the poetry to be very oral. When I became a feminist, I mean, I think like other people from minority groups, and I started looking at sort of my Yiddish education. I started asking the question, after all that education, I couldn't name a single woman writer. And I think that was the experience of a lot of women from minority groups who started looking at their own cultures. Right. And so I became interested in it both as a poet and as a scholar. I wanted to find Yiddish women writers. I wanted to translate them, and I wanted to incorporate some of the Yiddish into some of my work to make it more sort of a bridge to people who did not know Yiddish. And that included not just non-Jews, but Jews as well, because most Jews don't know Yiddish. Yeah. At least Ashkenazi Jews don't know Yiddish. Yeah. And they know a few words from television and from movies.
That's the category I'm in. But you've spilled over borders or defied them in so many ways. You're like a one-woman rebellion movement. I mean, feminist, lesbian, Holocaust survivor, Yiddishist, poet itself, which is, of course, a defiant act. That's a lot of plates to juggle.
Well, I think it doesn't feel, I mean, I think that one of the things that happens is you don't feel it. You sort of are it, and you try to express all those facets. I mean, I think I loved I loved the background I came from, but I also recognized that, especially when I came out, that there was a lot of bigotry in that background.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of biases. And even in the Yiddish, there's inherent in the language and how women are depicted, and the treatment of Yiddish writer indicates an enormous amount of sexism and sexist attitudes. And so it's a sort of double-edged sword, and I sort of experienced both the tug and the pull of that background, as well as the critical eye on it, and seeing its faults and its weaknesses.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I remember the first time I read the poem at LeGuin. I read it at the National Yiddish Book Center, and I was terrified. It was a Jewish audience. It was a Yiddishist audience. Their National Yiddish Book Center is dedicated to Yiddish, but I used the word lesbianka 3 times in the poem, and the first time I said it publicly,
wow,
I was trembling.
It's always the job of a poet, of course, to try to tell the deepest truth. I mean, which is impossible to get at, but that's what we spend our lives mining,
right.
In the mines about. So it's a scary process that I don't think people fully understand. Would you read us a poem, please? And then we can talk about that.
I'll read you the poem that I was so afraid to read then. I had just written it. I think it had just been published, and I wanted to read something with Yiddish in it, and I was just beginning this process or this experiment. It's called Etliche Wörter auf Mammeloschen, a few words in the mother tongue. Lamashal, for example, die Kurve, the whore, a woman who acknowledges her passions. Die Yidina, the Jewish woman, ignorant, overbearing. Let's face it, every woman is one. Die Yente, the gossip, the busybody who knows what's what and is never caught off guard. Die Lesbianke, the one with a roommate, though we never use the word. Das Weibel, the wife, or the little woman. In der Heim, at home, where she does everything to keep Yiddishkeit alive. Yiddishkeit, a way of being Jewish, always arguable. In Mark, where she buys die Kartoffel und Challah, yes, potatoes and challah, die Kartoffel, the material counterpart of Yiddishkeit. Mit Sibyllis, with onions that bring Tränen zu die Augen, tears to her eyes, when she sees how little it all is. Weniger und weniger, less and less. Die Challah, braided wie ihr Haar vor der Chasana, like her hair before the wedding when she was a schön Mädel, such a pretty girl. Die lange schwarze Haar, the long black hair, die lange schwarze Haar. A Frau cholemt, a woman dreams ihr Ort auf der Welt, her place in this world, und sie hat Moira, and she is afraid, so afraid of the words Kurve, Yidene, Yente, Lesbianke, Weibel. Sie cholemt, she dreams, und sie hat Moira, and she is afraid. Ihr Ort, die Welt, die Heim, der Mark. A Mädel cholemt, a Kurve cholemt, a Yidene cholemt, a Yente cholemt, a Lesbianke cholemt, a Weibel cholemt, die Kartoffel, die Challah, Yiddishkeit. Sie cholemt, die Haar, die lange schwarze Haar. Sie cholemt, sie cholemt, sie cholemt.
Mm. Oh, thank you. It's brilliantly constructed, because the first time we get it and the second time we get it with the English, and by the time it comes back by itself, we remember some of it. So you're teaching. You're teaching us.
I hope that's exactly.
Well, you're teaching
right.
us in the process of the poem. Yeah, it is. It's amazing. What is Yiddish, Irena? Is it part German and part what?
Well, Yiddish has 3 major components, and it has to do with the geography of Ashkenazi Jews. It has German in it, It has Hebrew in it,
Uh-huh.
and Aramaic, and it has Slavic components because the Jews moved from east, from Germany, as they progressed to Poland and Russia, and it was mainly there that it was spoken and written, and but it's not a dialect; it's a language in itself, which
Yes.
has its own grammar and though sometimes it's looked upon, Yiddish has been called jargon, and it's very looked down upon by sort of Central European Jews. They weren't too fond of their Eastern European brothers and sisters speaking Yiddish. It was a kind of tension among Ashkenazim.
I know it's looked down upon by Hebrew-speaking Jews in Israel too, by Sabras.
Yeah, it was, and they're trying to recover a little bit from that. It was forbidden to be used in Israel. You weren't supposed to speak it in the street.
Wow!
Not because it was jargon, but because they were trying to build Hebrew.
Yeah. Yes, that's right. But it's amazing that you're just sort of your everyday courage, because if there's an outside to beyond, that's where we find you. On the side of the Palestinians, on the side of Yiddish. If that's not in fashion, what is not in fashion? And there you are defending it. And your latest book in poems is A Few Words in the Mother Tongue, Poems Selected and New. The latest book of prose is Dreams of an Insomniac. Wonderful titles. Jewish feminist essays, speeches, and diatribes. And I thank you for the beauty of your work. And let's have a coffee soon, yes?
Thank you, Robin. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
And now it's time for a short break. We're at Women's Media Center Live, and I'm Robin Morgan. And coming up is a woman who is not only a fine poet, but also the co-founder of the first national organization for African American poets in the history of this country. So don't go away.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 CBS Radio.
Welcome back. The award-winning poet Toi Derricotte has numerous books of poetry, including The Undertaker's Daughter, Tender, Captivity, Natural Birth, and The Empress of the Death House. She's also the author of a literary memoir, The Black Notebooks. And together with Cornelius Eady, in 1996, she co-founded the Cave Canem Foundation, a national poetry organization committed to cultivating the artistic and professional growth of African American poets. She was elected Chancellor of the Academy of American Poets in 2012, and she's currently a professor of English at the University of Pittsburgh. Welcome to the program, Toi.
Oh, thank you, Robin.
Tell us a little bit about Cave Canem and congratulations on how it has grown since
thank you.
It's amazing.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. We were surprised by the effect. We knew that it was needed because Cornelius and I both graduated from programs where we were the only African American poets in the classroom, and I had never read an African American poet in college and graduate school, and there was always this feeling that the work was being marginalized, and so we knew it was important to get writers together all across the country who perhaps had never studied with another African American or even read another African American. Yeah. It's hard to keep up your own sense of yourself as a writer when this is mirrored back in our society in such a fragmented way. So that's what we did. We just did it out of our own pockets, and it was so profound that first night sitting in a circle where people went around and talked about why are you here, and they started just crying.
Of course.
It was, and the main thing that happened is that besides this intense study of writing with other people who understand your subject, but just mirroring back to them the wholeness of their experience, their own power, and they formed these networks so that they're constantly in touch with each other, and they help each other with their work and with career decisions. It's just made an incredible decision. Had an incredible effect on their lives.
Well, you've created a community. I mean,
right.
and the gift of that to the African American poets that get fostered and nurtured. Imagine how different it is to be a young poet there as opposed to what it was to be a young poet. You know?
Oh,
my
absolutely.
God,
absolutely.
You really changed it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the everything was there. All the ingredients were there. That just happened to be the right moment in time, I think.
Sure.
And it does take a lot of hard work to organize all the programs that we organize, but it just is an act of love and dedication for many people.
And there's a website where people can find out more, isn't there?
That's right, KaveKanumPoets.org.
So let's talk about you now as a poet, and a really fine poet. How does a poem start for you? Does it start with an image, with a word, with a situation, with a condition, or all of the above, depending on the poem?
I was just thinking about this, and it's funny. I just read something I wrote recently. It's just a couple sentences. Can I read it?
Please.
It says, I made poems in agony for many years, overcoming what weighed me down. I worked like one doing physical labor, digging trenches, dirty. And now I am practicing like one practices the piano, a clean work that one does in daylight with a little vase of flowers at eye level.
Oh, you've earned it. You've earned it. I think something like that happens with age.
I do too, and I'm very interested in that. I'm interested in how writers change not only their style and their subject, but the very reason that they're writing.
Yes.
And and I think this can be very discouraging and frightening. But I think if you hang in there, it turns out to be a wonderful opportunity for just seeing the world in a new way.
Oh, I
so
agree. I so agree. It used to be with me that I would the germ of a poem would. Well, I likened it to a bat flying through a cave. And sort of echolocating and bouncing off stalagmites and stalactites and getting a resonance back, and then I would, and the cave was my brain,
Wonderful. I love it.
And then if the resonance came back, I would know, there's something there. There's a germ of a poem there, and then it would begin to worry me, and I would worry it, sort of like a dog with a rag, and we would play around with each other for however long it took. But now it's more like you've watered something in the garden in the evening, and then you go out in the morning with a cup of tea, and it's a flower.
Oh God! Well, I fractured my knee about a year ago actually, and for about 6 weeks, I couldn't leave my house. I couldn't drive. I couldn't, people would ask me to do things. I couldn't do anything. And I had the greatest time just sitting. I had this tremendous library. And honest to God, I don't think I had sat in that seat and just looked around to see, well, what book do I want to read today?
Guiltless also, completely free of guilt.
Completely free of guilt,
Ooh.
Exactly.
Well, would you honor us with a poem or two?
Yes. Let's see. I was going to read 2 poems. One is called Black Bottom, and it's from Captivity, and it was written 30 years ago.
It's a famous poem now.
I think it's been in a lot of anthologies, and then I'm going to read a poem about the same subject that I wrote just a couple years ago.
Oh, lovely.
So this is Black Bottom. there were black bottoms all over the United States, and before desegregation, when black people lived in the same area, you'd have professional people living next to people who, worked in a grocery store or cleaned somebody's house. Everybody lived together. But then as class began to separate people, you would have middle class areas. And so this is writing about this separation and going back to see the people in Black Bottom. When relatives came from out of town, we would drive down to Black Bottom, drive slowly down the congested main streets, Beaubien and Hastings, trapped in the mesh of Saturday night. Freshly escaped black middle class, we snickered and were proud. The louder the streets, the prouder. We laughed at the bright clothes of a prostitute, a man sitting on a curb with a bottle in his hand. We smelled barbecue cooking in dented washtubs, and our mouths watered. As much as we wanted it, we couldn't take the chance. Rhythm and blues came from the windows, the throaty voice of a woman lost in the bass, in the drums, in the dirty down and out, the grind. I love to see a funeral, then I know it ain't mine. We rolled our windows down so that the waves rolled over us like blood. We hoped to pass invisibly, knowing on Monday we would return safely to our jobs, the post office and classroom. We wanted our sufferings to be offered up as tender meat, and our triumphs to be belted out in raucous song. We had lost our voice in the suburbs, in Conant Gardens, where each brick house delineated a fence of silence. We had lost the right to sing in the street and damn creation. We returned to wash our hands of them, to smell them, whose very existence tore us down to the human.
Wow. Wow. And then the one on, you say, the same subject or overlapping subject matter, written.
Yes.
Written.
Yes.
How many years later?
30 years.
Wow.
This is Weekend Guests from Chicago, 1945. In their brand new caramel Cadillac, Julia and Walter arrived at 4. Trunks stuffed with leather suitcases, steaks, champagne and oysters in a cooler, and Walter's only drink, Johnny Walker Blue. Julia, hands flaring in the clunky music of a pound of real gold charms. Walter in a tan linen jacket and shoes soft as old money. Sweet-tempered, sweet-tongued, he teased the women to blushing and let his wife reign queen in a diamond ring to knock your eyes out. She was known from New York to L.A. for her fried chicken and greens, and didn't hesitate after hours of driving to throw an apron over a French cotton dress and slap the flour on 30 or more pieces. Oh, the chicken breasts and thighs spattering juicy in just the right degree of heat, as she told stories hilarious and true to a kitchen full of steamy women that made them double over and pee themselves. Saturday morning, men to golf and women in floral robes with cups of a New Orleans blend so strong they said it stained the rim and turned you black. Me in a high chair straining for language, my bottle stirred with a spoon of coffee and half a pint of cream. At 15, my first trip cross-country on a train, I stopped to spend the night. We took the L to Marshall Fields, where Julia bought my first expensive cold creams and hose the shades of which, for the first time, dared the colors of our colored skin. She told me she had lovers, one a handsome Pullman porter. My last nights on board, I myself enjoyed a notable service. A cafe au lait gentleman woke me for breakfast by slipping his hand through the sealed drapes and gently shaking my rump. I waited all night, damp with wonder. She had a wart on her chin or nose, I can't remember which. She wore it like exquisite jewelry, the way Marilyn Monroe wore her beauty mark, with unforgettable style.
Ah. Oh, brava.
Thank you.
Brava. The poems on race that you have produced over the years, in clusters and then didn't for a while and then came back to it at a whole other level. I don't ever recall reading in the Black Arts movement anywhere else, because there's such a personal, tender, there's a real tenderness and lyricism there. There's a poem called, in one of the books, called A Weakness or The Weakness, about the grandmother, your grandmother, that is also just just a small moment that is the world. And I'm wondering, do you think that approach was because you were a woman and noticed things that the guys don't notice, or that it just came out of your own background and your own soul?
Well, there's many influences in any poet's life. And I was very attracted to the confessional poets. And at the time, the Black Arts movement was so important, and it was about changing this negative image and impact and the way racism had played out among Black writers, where you had to choose if you were a writer or a Black writer, and then there was this antagonism between the writers. Also, I felt that certain silences in my own family had played out in very destructive ways, and I felt that these things, these forces in our own hearts, were really connected to the larger forces in society. And I really hoped by probing personal shame and rage that I could make that larger connection and actually kind of resurrect that part of myself that had been so harmed in childhood.
Well, you've not only done that, but that you've done that with tremendous aesthetic grace.
Well, yeah.
I mean, the women's movement has the phrase the personal is political, and the irony to me is that these quote personal unquote poems of yours about Black families, about women's sidelong glances, about these tiny little, are in some ways more profoundly political than all of the words ending in TION and ISM. You know what I mean?
I'm so glad you said that, because for me, to me, it's always, every book is about form and a change in form. When I go into different subjects, I have to, my books look different. Every book looks different. And there's a certain form for me that's attached not to the, well, of course it is attached to the classic forms, but form and truth for me, when I really feel like I've gotten there and I've done the hard work and maybe done this, said the thing you're not supposed to say, but also made it lyrical and made it, given it an artistic shape, that's when I know that the work is done.
That's right. Thank you so much. This has just been wonderful.
I enjoyed it too, Robin.
We have to take another short break here. When we come back, we'll hear from someone who is one of the greatest living storytellers in the world, and also one of the best poets, Ursula K. LeGuin.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 CBS Radio.
Welcome back again. The major American writer Ursula K. LeGuin is perhaps best known in many circles for her fiction, including the classic science fiction novels Left Hand of Darkness and The Lathe of Heaven, and the great Earthsea cycle of fantasy novels. She's published 21 novels, 11 volumes of short stories, 4 collections of essays, 12 books for children. She's published translation and received many honors and awards, too many by far to list here. But she's also a fine poet. She's published 12 chapbooks and books of poetry, and the most recent of which is called Finding My Elegy, New and Selected Poems, 1960 to 2010. And it is in that capacity as a poet that she joins us again today. Dear Ursula, welcome back to the program.
I'm glad to be here, Robin.
I'm so glad that we're able to have you here in your capacity as a poet. And so I thought today we would talk about the differences in writing poetry from other disciplines, and maybe have you read some poems, I hope. What do you find is most telling when you find yourself writing a poem as opposed to when something presents itself as a story?
Well, in a sort of practical sense, as opposed to a novel, a 12 or 15-line poem doesn't take quite as long, which can be rather nice, So writing a novel is, setting out on a long voyage, and you're not quite sure you're going to get there. Whereas the poem is sort of more something that you have in your hand and can work on and come back to and work on and come back to, but it doesn't eat you up.
Unless it's an epic poem.
Yeah, or unless it's sort of a big poem, and then they can indeed devour you, yeah.
Yeah, they can indeed. Well, it's because poetry is about distillation, at least for me. It's when Twitter came along, I thought, so what? Poets have been distilling for centuries. This is nothing.
They spell better too.
Exactly. We know how to get things in a nutshell and count ourselves kings and queens of infinite space. But some of your poems are in fact story poems as well. I mean, they tell stories. The storyteller in you will out no matter what discipline you're working in.
Yeah, that is true. And I like narrative poems. I grew up with the Lays of Ancient Rome and things like that people used to read. And I've never felt this absolute division between the lyric and the narrative that many poets and I guess some prose writers feel.
I don't feel it either.
It's funny. It's Virginia Woolf did not write poetry, but she never orated about the fact that prose writers can't write poetry and vice versa.
Precisely.
Which I think some people have been rather, particularly modernists, have been rather inclined to do. That sort of, you are a poet or you are not a poet.
Well,
and if you are a poet, you can't be anything else. And that, I mean, starting with Goethe and people like that, that's silly.
Yeah, it's very silly. Well, but there are people, who are much more concerned with labels and boundaries than they are with what the content is of either. And it's very boring to me, I don't,
yeah.
It's all about language and words and what makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up. And then I know that it's good and what it's called. And some things are very clearly poems and some things are clearly not, but I'm just less interested in the labeling,
Right. Well, gosh, I've been fighting that all my life with the labeling certain kinds of fiction as genre and therefore inferior.
Yes.
It's
well, maybe
massively stupid.
Maybe they label in order to rank. Yes, it's hierarchy, absolutely. That's the whole purpose of it, yeah. So, and which is very boring in itself. I know that you've been part of a poetry workshop for some time in Portland, where you live, and and you praise it very highly. Talk a little bit about that and how that came about and why it's so important to you.
Well, it came about quite a few years ago. Judith Barrington started the group. She's no longer a member of it, but there are 8 of us, and we've been working together. It's not exactly a workshop. It's just a poetry writing group. We meet monthly and follow the usual pattern. One of us gives an assignment in rotation, and we can write to the assignment if we want to, and very often do.
Mm-hmm.
But otherwise, we just bring a poem or two and go around and workshop it, with the poet silent and the others putting in critique. And, having 8 of us having worked together for years now,
right.
We can be very informal.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have to. But that we observe the rule of the poet is silent, because that is very important.
The poet doesn't get to defend the work and say, but I really meant...
But no, they can only say that when everybody else has had their say.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the workshop technique I've always used in teaching, and it works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's also wonderful to have something that is a deadline that functions in one's mind as, I want to have something new to bring to the group.
Absolutely, for all of us, where our ages vary from. Still something under 50, I think, to 84 in my case. And the older I get, the more I need that deadline.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I know.
I think I'm getting lazy.
Oh, yeah, you're notoriously lazy, Ursula, yes.
Well, I'm getting lazier than I was.
I'll believe that when I hear it. This is all women, or is this a mixed group?
It's all women.
Which that changes the tenor also.
Yes, it does. Sometimes it's necessary, and I think that some all male groups are happy that way.
Yes.
I just don't know.
Well, for one thing, it means you eat better.
We eat very well, yes.
Yes, because if it's a potluck and people bring food, if it's a women's group, you generally speaking, unless there's a male chef in the group in the boys' corral, you eat better. Can I presume on you to read us some poems? Maybe maybe a new one and some poems from Finding My Elegy. That would be so lovely.
Well, sure. I will read one that was written to an assignment for my group. Mm-hmm. The assignment simply being to write a poem about a story that you heard or read. That was all.
Interesting.
So this is called The Story. It's just part of a story, actually, quite a lot of stories. The part where the third son or the stepdaughter sent on the impossible errand through the uncanny forest comes across a fox with its paw caught in a trap, or little sparrows fallen from the nests, or some ants in trouble in a puddle of water. He frees the fox. She puts the fledglings in the nest. They get the ants safe to their anthill. The little fox will come back later and lead him to the castle where the princess is imprisoned. The sparrows will fly before her to where the golden egg is hidden. The ants will sort out every poppy seed for them from the heap of sand before the fatal morning. And I don't think I can add much to this story. All my life, it's been telling me, if I'll only listen, who the hero is and how to live happily ever after.
Oh, that's a lovely one. That's quite a poem to have turned out on assignment.
Well, we have all found in this group that the assignments often, whether they're subject or form, they bring out something that we didn't know we had to say. Well, and it's particularly mysterious when it's an assignment in form, write a villanelle, write a sonnet,
yes,
write
of course.
quatrains.
Of course.
And think, oh dear, I can't do that. And then you find that, oh yeah, and then the form makes you say things.
Yeah. Poetry for me is the place where I find out what I knew that I didn't know I knew it.
Well, writing is pretty much that.
Yes,
huh?
that's very true, but especially in poetry. In poetry, it comes up and it knocks me on the side of my head and says, "You didn't know that you knew that?" It's quite extraordinary. Oh, more, please. More poems, please.
Oh, here's a little one, which is sort of about writing fantasy and writing poetry. It's called Almost and Always. Almost they were the amethyst mountains and the clear, faint hollowing of horns in far forests over the twilight border, and faded into daylight and the noise of traffic. Always the half-guessed, miraculous line trembled on the edge of being in this language and was almost and faded into the expectable, ordinary poem.
Oh. I love that poem. That poem is in Finding My Elegy, isn't it?
Yeah, that and what, shall I read one more?
Yes, please.
Shall I read the funny one?
You can read anything you feel like.
Well, this one is called She Remembers the Famous Poets.
Oh, yes. Good.
And it starts with two quotations, one from Ronsard. Quand vous serez bien vieille au soir à la chandelle. And the other from Yeats. When you are old and gray and full asleep. Now I am old and gray and sit alone beside my fire. I think of lovely boys I knew when I was young and fair. And some of them wrote poems about my eyes and their desire. My winsome Irish Willie and my gallant French Pierre. It makes me smile to think about how we made love and all the tender things they told me as I gaze into the flames these winter nights. But Lord, I never can recall a single word of all they wrote, or even their last names. That's sort of mean, but...
Oh, no, I just love it. I love it because both the Ronsard and the Yeats are, in effect, poems where the literature majors among our listeners here will know this, are poems in which the male poet is basically wagging a finger at the beloved woman and saying, you'll be sorry you didn't recognize me for this great lover who I was, and you'll regret it, and, love passed you by, and you'll be sorry. And it's so wonderful that she's sitting there and she just can't remember who the hell they were.
Remember she liked them?
Oh,
Nice boys, yeah.
Absolutely. I had a good time. They were fun. And they wrote something, but that's gone. And their names are kind of, who was that? It's just wonderful. It's just lovely.
Well, it was fun to write.
We have time for one more. Can we squeeze one more in?
I wrote this for a local award I got. And it's called Read at the Award Dinner, May 1996. Mm-hmm. Beware when you honor an artist. You are praising danger. You are holding out your hand to the dead and the unborn. You are counting on what cannot be counted. The poet's measures serve anarchic joy. The storyteller tells one story, freedom. Above all, beware of honoring women artists, for the housewife will fill the house with lions, and in with the grandmother come bears, wild horses, great horned owls, coyotes.
Oh, I love that one. I love that. It's one of my favorite. In my copy of Finding My Elegy, that's one that has the page naughtily turned down. It's dog-eared. It's dog-eared. It's marked.
I'm glad you dog-ear pages. I do all the time.
Oh, goody. We won't tell. So the latest book is Finding My Elegy, New and Selected Poems by Ursula K. LeGuin. And it's a Houghton Mifflin, I think, publication. And it's wonderful. It's a collection of the older poems and some new ones. And keep writing and keep being your wonderful self. And I'm so grateful you were part of our Poetry Month celebration here.
Well, it was a great pleasure, Robin.
We need to take one more quick break here at Women's Media Center Live, where I remain your faithful Robin Morgan. When we come back, we'll have some fighting words.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 CBS Radio.
Welcome back again. And now it's time for Fighting Words. It's time for Fighting Words, but this week, surprise, Fighting Words will be a poem. Of my own, in this case. It's from the book that I've been working on, which will be called Dark Matter, the new book of poems, not yet finished, but soon. And it's from a suite of poems in the book called the New Old Woman Suite. And the poem is called A Worm of Robins. Not having died yet, I can't say how difficult it is, or even if it is. I'm sure it varies. Death must have the widest repertoire of all, considering that the universe's sole consistency is entropy. But this I know so far, for me at least, likely it's not pain or fear of pain, or life's small cruelties or monstrous ones that can make dying hard. They'd make it easy, I should think, to leave, to sleep, slip free. But suddenly in autumn, morning glories poke soft cerulean heads above the crisp ivy they've climbed to the top of my garden fence. Here! They swivel, seeking the pale November sun. 3 mornings later, they're done. And suddenly in winter, bent double by a freezing rain, hurrying along 9th Street, there! Swarming a thorn tree, blistered with red berries, maybe 30 robins. That's called a worm of robins, I learn. Passers-by scold a soaked old woman who laughs, leisurely taking pictures with her phone. She thinks, I'll plant a hawthorn. Then discovers that they live for centuries, taking decades to fruit. Plant then for others. Hold your own brief hour, I learn, in disregard. It's sweetness that turns leaving sour, joy that makes dying hard. And that's it for this week. You've been listening to us on CBS Radio WJFK 1580 AM or visiting us at WMClive.com for this and for a whole rich archive of all our previous episodes that are also at iTunes worldwide, where you can stream, download, and subscribe to our show's podcast. Portions of this program were taped earlier. Views expressed here do not necessarily represent the WMC. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. WMC President and Executive Producer of this program, Julie Burton. Senior Producer, Crystal Williams-Chancellor. And our founding sponsor, Regina K. Scully. I'm Robin Morgan. Thanks for being with us, and join us next week. April is also National Parkinson's Disease Awareness Month, and we are going to get more aware, especially of the problems and solutions affecting women and PD. A neurologist will visit with the latest research. An activist who just underwent deep brain stimulation will describe it and how it works. And the vice president of the Parkinson's Disease Foundation will talk about new ways to empower women with PD. Last, I'll give you an update about my own condition. Spoiler alert, it's pretty damn good. Meanwhile, look for us on Facebook and Twitter, and right here on Women's Media Center Live.
For the smartest talk about news, politics, sex, books, religion, race, and more, tune your radio to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Audacious, witty, provocative, informative, and fun. It's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 CBS Radio and WMCLive.com. Talk radio with a brain.